Everyone. We have some procedural matters to consider. As we have a quorum of 4 members, I now call the meeting to order. I haven't received any apologies today from any members. I'm sure they'll pop along. I remind members, staff, witnesses and those in the public galleries to turn off their mobile phones. As you'll be aware, mobile phones interfere with the sound system here, so I just ask members and witnesses to check their mobile phones now. We're starting in public session and then we'll be followed by a short private session. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay. The 2 main witnesses will be requested to speak for between 5 and 10 minutes, and this will be followed by questions and answer session. Is that agreed? Agreed. I suggest that members should limit their questions to between 3 and 5 minutes, but members may come in a second time, and I'll work with members here, we'll cooperate, but in the interest of fairness now, I think if we could stick to between 3 and 5 minutes, we'll get through this. Is that agreed? Agreed. It is also proposed that the opening statements and any other documents supplied by the witnesses to the committee be published on the committee's website after the meeting. Is that agreed? Agreed. I wish to draw your attention to the fact that by virtue of Section 17(2)(l) of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of their evidence to this committee. However, if you are directed by the Chairman to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect to your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any persons or entity by name, or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable. I also wish to advise that any submissions or opening statements or other documents that you have supplied to the committee will be published on the committee's website after this meeting. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that they should not comment on, criticise or make a charge against a person outside the Houses or an official, either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. This is our first in a series of meetings on sustainable small rural businesses, which is a priority in our work programme. I would like to welcome Dr. Cook, who is the author of a very fine publication, The Enterprising Community, a bottom-up perspective on the capacity within communities to regenerate, which was recently published and indeed launched by the Minister, Minister Ring. Dr. Cook has a very interesting CV. From a master glass cutter in Waterford Crystal to a lecturer in Dublin City University. Dr. Cook was involved in setting up the Copper Coast UNESCO Geopark in Waterford, an example that other parts of rural Ireland would benefit from. I would also like to welcome Mr. Éamon O'Reilly, Vice Chairman of the ILDN and CEO of the NEWKD, and his colleagues, Mr. Declan Rice, CEO, Canney Leader Partnership, Ms. Martina Early, CEO, Roscommon Leader Partnership, Mr. Jim Finn, Chairperson, North Tipperary Leader Partnership, and Mr. Joe Saunders, Manager, Irish Local Developments Network. So you're all very welcome, and we're going to start off by asking Dr. Cook to make his opening statement.
Just to say hello to everyone, and I'd just like to thank everyone for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to maybe make a few comments on what we consider to be the enterprising community. And just to say that there's hundreds, if not thousands, of those communities around the country, and there's a different picture in the country, as I think, from what the media say, and a lot of times, of course, a lot of things in communities is true, and they've suffered grievous damage. But they're all, most of the ones that I've visited have been very strong in their determination to recover and to become even more prosperous than before. So the enterprising community, as I see it, it's a community is socio-cultural economic ecosystem. That's very important, and I have evidence. I could produce evidence behind all these statements. I quickly go through, but we haven't got the time to do that. Our understanding is that it's a problem solver, it's a wealth creator, and it's an organiser. the community. It shapes values, character, attitude and respect. It's the most fundamental institution in this country. It shares responsibility for services and facilities. Families, schools, clubs want the best for their families and their children, and they're prepared to work for it. Problems are solved and are prevented at source. And social enterprises address many needs and opportunities that are there. So go to the next. Yeah, I'm just making one small case study, which is our own one at home, and I can tell you that we're only one of thousands, and there are better ones than ours, and I acknowledge that. I've been in them. I've been speaking to the people, but I'm just using this example because I know it best. We were established in 1993. There was 4 different types of communities in the one parish. You know, one of them was a Church of Ireland village, one of them was a fishing harbour, the other 2 were internal, ordinary agricultural type communities. There was 3 reasons for start-up. One was each of the 2 parts of the parish, Fenner and Dunhill, lost a teacher in both schools. Dunhill from 4 to 3, Fenner from 3 to 2. There was a decline in population after the 80s, and emigration reached its highest in 1989. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989. There was all sorts of uncertainty at that time, something like it is now. But a key thing was that leader partnership, the county enterprise boards and the community employment scheme were set up. This is fundamental. And it's just coincidental that I'm sitting with 3 leader people here, but leader was fundamental to us setting up. They helped us. They were the most prominent group that helped us set up in 1993. But another key group was that our local GA club built an indoor complex in 1989 for 350,000 Irish pounds. It cleared all the debt in a few years by voluntary fundraising. And within the parish, looking at what went on, a realisation dawned of a new capacity that was in the parish. And could that be turned to other things, for a lot of people, more important things like jobs and the schools and all that. And I just make the point, and even though I'm a avowed GA person, I think GA clubs are representative, they're competitive, they're fearless, and they're caring. And you can see that at funerals, or you can see that when there's a crisis in the parish. So it's much more than just a sports organisation. And I'd hope that a number of things that happened recently over Páirc Uí Chaoimh, that people who have a different view would understand what they're dealing with, and how precious that is to this country. So now the results today, that was set up. The results today is that the schools now, Dunhill now have 9 staff members instead of 3. Fenner have 17 staff members instead of 2. So you can, now there's no special reason for that, but I was told not to talk, to go ahead and just run through the thing, and then you can ask me questions on it. Population went up 25% from 1993. Employment, 250 jobs were created in the Enterprise Centre from 2000 when it was set up. Currently in the Enterprise Centre, there's 36 enterprises and 75 jobs, and we've achieved international recognition through the Copper Coast, which is a EU and UNESCO Global Geopark, the only voluntary one in the world. We have integrated constructed wetlands, and today down in Dunhill, the RTE programme, Ear to the Ground, are spending the whole day down there developing a programme. Fenner Bog achieved Dunhill Castle, which is the home of the Powers, and the first baron of Dunhill was Robert Lepore in 1174, and then we have the Ireland Newfoundland connections. There's a special relationship between the southeast, Waterford, Kilkenny, Wexford, and South Tip with Newfoundland, and we only had 80 of them over here in August, at the end of August. And I'm saying that all these results were achieved mainly against the odds. We had a financial crisis. We have no broadband. We're expecting broadband in a few weeks, but we've been expecting it for the last year, and we're in the blue area and everything, but we're hopeful, we're praying that that'll come our way. There's fragmented supports all over the place. Nobody can tell us, there's nobody in this world can explain the supports that are available for social enterprise, because there's so many and so varied. Social enterprise itself hasn't captured the recognition of the government yet. We're hopeful now, very shortly again. And there's a big, there was always been, in my understanding with communities, there's a huge emphasis on disadvantage. And I have no issue with that at all. But I have a big issue ignoring resourceful communities who want to contribute so that the disadvantaged will have more. You know what I mean? I had no issue with that at all. And I was chairman, we set up a social enterprise in Waterford, in the most difficult area of Waterford, in Ballybeg, and I was chairman of that. And so I'm not making any point at all about this other than everyone seemed to be consumed with disadvantage, and we had people in the country trying to make up stories so that they could claim disadvantage. It was a disastrous, a disastrous approach to the whole thing. So communities creating jobs. Then we decided to set that up in 2011 because we held 3 conferences in Dunhill, and they were packed out, came from everywhere. And we all said we'd have to get to work together. So it's a national voluntary shared knowledge network. It shares ideas, problems, solutions, resources, and it helps communities avoid mistakes, waste, duplication, displacement. It identifies and activates dormant resources and better ways. It provides scaffolding for communities starting off with examples and tools. It simplifies complex documents, criteria, and it tries to remove barriers, difficult as that may be. And we also try and develop new pathways to success. And we have been successful, but we really haven't any support. We haven't been recognised. It's just a pity when you see so many communities around the country working together and prepared to work together that it can't get that support. So anyway, Commonsu 22 then is a jobs model that we've developed, and Commonsu means empowerment, and 22 is 2022, which is the centenary anniversary of the first government. And we would like all our communities to be able to look back over the 100 years and say, we had ups and downs, but look at where we are now, and we believe that can happen. It's made up of the group is made up of the CCJG internal level education. We target 10 jobs in every community, and that's just a starting point. We have a local task group and facilitator who was given a 6 months timeline to come up with all the assets, opportunities, enterprise, in their own location. And that is not to be interfered with by any agency. They have to be left alone so they can figure it out for themselves, and they can work for themselves, and they can say things to themselves that they couldn't say when there's anyone else there. And that includes CCJ. We only set up the framework for them. We complete an assets and opportunities audit stage 1, and that's all done voluntary. The J said when we went to them that there's 3 things they wanted from us, which suited us down to the ground. They said we want this to be voluntary, community, and we don't want any of our current officers involved. We want to leave them work with their clubs, but all the previous officers and all the other business supporters and all that, you can take all them whatever you want from that. Then the second stage would be then that when we have that done and when they have that done, then they engage with the relevant agencies, and then that's where they then create the jobs. So it's job creation, empowerment and capacity building. It's the 3 things. It's not just job creation. And I hope that point has got across. So, and I'm saying that above anything else at this point in time, and families are concerned, this is a democratic imperative that the state should be seen to partner with communities on regeneration projects. And that's on the next education, employment, housing, all that. There's one parish locally near me in another county that has identified, the postman has helped them identify 80 empty houses in the parish, and nobody can understand what's going on, that something has not been done to. So the idea is empowering communities to use the social capital and to build capacity, build prosperity from the ground up, engage them, take them. At the minute, a lot of them are helpless victims of the recession or of the austerity, when they should be active participants in changing the whole thing. Solve and prevent problems at source, rebalance the population, the economy with IDA, EI and social enterprise, and build respect. This is crucial, so that we won't repeat, as we see in the UK and in America, that we go out of our way to build respect between the institutions of the state and the political system and communities where all the people live. And it can be done this way. So finally now I have 10 recommendations, and I quickly go through them. Facilitate the new social enterprise policy and implementation plan for January 2019. And I'm asking all parties to back that, because there's no division between any party on that, surely. Identify supports in state and community and private, the Department of Rural and Community Development, and if they do that, they'll know the extent of what's possible in communities if they only look and see and describe and identify all the different resources. Pilot Commonsu 22 in the South East. We piloted in Galway and it was a great success. Joe McDonough unfortunately died, and he was leading the whole thing. And we want to bring the second pilot down to the South East, where we can have some influence on it, and that we make sure it works. Alleviate community enterprise centre debt. I have been talking to Enterprise Ireland, and we want the NACA, which is the National Association of Community Enterprise Centres, because there's a number of community enterprise centres that ran into difficulty when the trouble came. Unlike private companies. They refuse to give up. They refuse to leave the debt there. We are one of them, and we have paid our way up to this day, but we have a serious debt, and it's not too serious. We're able to handle it, but to give us a chance, we need it, and we know that there's others around the country. The social enterprise, well, I'm asking parties, would they put social enterprise into their party manifestos or their programmes for government for the next election? I'm asking all parties to do that. We need access to fibre broadband countrywide. That's the Department of it. Now, I can't tell you how important that is. I can't tell you how many jobs we've lost. I can't tell you how many businesses we've lost. Our education centre wants to become a digital education centre, and they're crying on my shoulder every day. And when I go back tomorrow, they'll be after me again, wanting to know, is there any news on fibre broadband? We're in a blue area, and we have it all linked up, and we're told we'll have it in a few weeks. We want to maximise EU funds for social enterprise. That's the. Now, in 2011, Barroso and Barnier established the Business Initiative, and they set up a €100 million fund for social enterprise. Now, we have heard nothing about that since, and they're big people in the EU, and they're totally in favour of social enterprise. So we're asking the government, you know, to get onto committees, and we know that they're not on some of the committees, and that they're thinking of getting onto committees, and they're willing to get onto committees at this stage. Pilot social enterprise project in North of Ireland. We were involved 6 communities in Waterford, we were involved with 6 communities in Antrim. We spent 3 years with them. The most telling statement from a very strong woman, Angela Hayden, who was a nationalist and who was a superb person, said that the thing that she got more, the last session, she said, what I got most out of this was that I was able to talk to my Protestant neighbours in a collaborative setting. Not that she could talk to us down in Waterford, and which she appreciated, not that she could talk to others, nationalists in the north of Ireland, but that she could actually talk to what she had never spoken to before in that setting. And there's a great. Now, the other thing, of course, we want the opportunity to export to the north of Ireland. Like, you know. So, and the last point is credit unions provide loan. Now, we know our own credit unions, our own money is all tied up. There's lots of money available, and I know there's difficulty with central bank. I know there's difficulty with policy. I know there's, but we're asking, would the ILCU, the Irish League of Credit Unions, would they do something for that? And of course, the last point is the enterprising community. And I just hope that people would purchase the book and would promote the book everywhere they can, because in it will open. I think it will open eyes. The last point I want to say to you all. You're all going to be there's elections next year in European Union and I know you'll all be down around the southeast, and I'm inviting every one of you here to come to Dunhill, and I'll spend 2 hours and I'll show you until I've persuaded you that there is a huge potential and possibility around social enterprise in this country. To me, it's a €1 billion business. It's a €1 billion sector. It's €1 billion. It isn't what people think is a small thing that, you know, that they're doing good work and they're great people and all that, volunteers and all that. This is a €1 billion business. This includes the universities. This includes credit unions. This includes a lot that people don't associate with it. Hey, thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Seán, very well presented. I'll now call on Mr. Éamon O'Reilly, Vice Chairperson of the ILDN, to make an opening statement. And perhaps you might call in some of your colleagues as well as part of this opening statement. If that's what you have in mind, you can bring them in at some stage anyway. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Cathaoirleach, and thanks very much for the invitation from all the committee here today. We really welcome this opportunity because we see that Irish Local Development Network and its members, we're deeply entwined with the objectives of this committee in promoting viable rural communities. ILDN is the representative body for the country's 49 local development companies, 35 of which operate in rural areas, so we cover the whole country. Last year, the local development companies between us supported more than 15,000 communities and community groups and 173,000 individuals by delivering approximately 330 million worth of programmes on behalf of the state. Of these, over 11,000 community groups and over 83,000 individuals were in rural areas. Almost 6,000 rural dwellers were found employment through the local employment service. 3,116 moved to self-employment. Over 5,000 moved on to 2 community workplace schemes, and almost 3,000 provided valuable services on the rural social scheme. A further 1,500 plus are employed in social enterprises, which is what Seán was talking about a few minutes ago, that have been supported by local development companies. The range of programmes delivered by local development companies allows for an integrated approach to rural development. Examples include LEADER, the Social Inclusion and Community Activation Programme, otherwise known as SICAP, the Local Employment Service, RSS, Rural Recreation and Walk Schemes, Social Enterprise Supports, Social Farming, TOOS, Education, Childcare and Public Health Programmes. In addressing rural sustainability and rural businesses, we would like to focus on 5 key principles and then invite your questions and discussion, and maybe some of my colleagues might come in after that at that stage, Chairperson. Thank you. The first important point we'd like to make is the one-stop-shop approach and innovative brokerage. Rural communities are increasingly confused and frustrated by the plethora of fragmented funding schemes, often with contradictory qualifying criteria released in an unplanned and ad hoc manner. Local development companies are well placed, given their work and methodology and local links and reputation, to signpost and coordinate rural and community development funding on a one-stop-shop basis, similar to what the LEOs do with enterprise funding. They bring the added value of 25 years of animating rural communities to lead their own development. As a result of their work on LEADER and other programmes, local development companies have recognised experience of supporting, transferring and leading innovation in the regions. ILDN proposes to formalise that innovation brokerage as part of its range of animation services and considers that there should be one integrated rural development strategy for an area over a 5-year period, which covers LEADER and other national development, rural development programmes. The second point is community-led local development, or CLLD. The community-based bottom-up methodology of local development companies is key to our effectiveness. It includes an emphasis on pre-development work, community animation, building capacity of individuals and communities, which Seán again mentioned earlier, accepting the individual starting point and customising appropriate local solutions. The positive impact of local development companies in independent reviews of SICAP, LEADER, LES and the Back to Work Area Enterprise Allowance testifies to the effectiveness of this approach. CLLD aims to promote integrated approaches of territorial development and offers potential savings and increased effectiveness in rural policy. The added value of CLLD manifests itself in improved social capital, improved governance and enhanced social impacts. We welcome that the EU is seeking to broaden the uptake by Member States of the CLLD approach, and hope that the Irish Government will incorporate the CLLD across all EU programmes from the next round in 2020. And this will provide the kind of bottom-up enabling environment needed for meaningful social and economic development. The third point is recognising the specific features of rural areas. Rural social structures are changing, and we must recognise the features of rurality that require specific solutions and be prepared to act on them. For many rural dwellers, the choice is to migrate, remain un- or underemployed, or create your own job. That is why the impact of over 3,000 people supported into self-employment last year is so significant. Imagine the headlines if one employer created over 3,000 jobs in rural Ireland. Regarding jobs, the local employment service run by the local development companies placed 5,700 people in employment last year. The LES is operating in just a handful of rural counties, so what is now needed is a national, community-based and not-for-profit employment service that encompasses and recognises the nature of rural employment, underemployment and seasonal employment. Moving on to a point that Seán covered a lot on social enterprise. The 2013 FORFOS report on social enterprise estimated that just 1.25% of the labour force work for social enterprises in Ireland. And if Ireland's social enterprise sector were to approach mean or average EU levels of output, or the goals set by EU under the Europe 2020 strategy, it is estimated that there could be at least 65,000 jobs in social enterprise in Ireland. Along with Seán, we welcome the forthcoming publication of a national strategy on social enterprise for the sector, and it must ensure that the appropriate resources and supports be made available to potential social entrepreneurs so that the potential identified by FORFOS can be realised. And in that regard, I echo Seán's call for government to seek greater EU resources for this area of investment. On social inclusion, the Department of Rural and Community Development has responsibility for SICAP, the National Social Inclusion Programme, and this is a key programme in enabling local development companies to employ staff and operate many of the other state programmes for which we get no management fee. SICAP has suffered very deep cuts in the past 8 years and requires significant restoration of funding if we are to retain staff, professional staff that have built up 25 years of experience. The fourth point then is the current leader programme processes. All parties to the current leader programme have acknowledged the severe difficulties in its effective delivery. Notwithstanding our anticipation of the problems introduced at the design stage, the member companies have closely worked with DRCD and the LCDCs to ensure accelerated rollout. Credit must be given to the Minister and officials for realising in 2017 that the programme was in crisis and implementing changes at that stage to the operating rules. These changes were the minimum needed for the programme to function, but ideally more radical reforms would be necessary to truly liberate the programme and should be taken into context for the next programme, i.e. the securing of block exemptions for leader with regard to state aid regulations, the facilitation of LAGs and local development companies having full access to all the priorities of the Rural Development Programme funds, and a more facilitatory approach to inspection and monitoring regime which recognises that leader is about innovation and area planning, and there is a risk element to that work that we do as well. My colleague Mr Rice can also address later the issue of the autonomy of local development companies as local action groups delivering leader, and how the change from the last programme has elongated the supply chain of leader funding to the detriment of rural communities and businesses. It is imperative that all parties learn from the current programme. The new RDP should provide greater flexibility for leader to be implemented as a genuine bottom-up approach to rural development. We would also encourage the Government and the Department and this committee to ensure that the maximum level of leader funding is availed of through CAP. Overall, we will be looking to secure a minimum of 400 million for the next leader programme. The last point is on smart villages. The Cork Declaration in 2016 emphasised new approaches to overcoming the digital divide between rural and urban areas, and to develop the potential offered by connectivity and digitisation of rural areas. Emphasis was given to the need for integrated approaches and the interaction between different policy fields in view of increasing complementarity and coherence. The concept of smart villages relates not just to being technology smart, but finding ways for the bottom up to avail of opportunities and address challenges across the whole range of rural life, including service provision, enterprise development and culture. There is much more potential in this approach, and with local development companies already implementing this approach, my colleagues will be happy to elaborate on this area. In conclusion, we would again thank the committee for this invitation and welcome the opportunity to discuss these and other relevant issues the committee might wish to ask us.
Thanks very much. Thank you. I now invite members their questions or observations, and the first person I've indicated is Deputy Martin Canney.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and I'd also like to thank all the witnesses for coming in. And first of all, the enthusiasm of Seán, I think, is contagious for all of us, and it's certainly something for someone. I live in a rural parish, and some of those things that you were saying really struck home with me, because our parish has a 3-teacher school, and tomorrow, which is the 30th, we don't have enough pupils to keep that 3-teacher school. And over the summer we ran a campaign to get new families to come to the area, and we got new families interested in coming and living in the parish, but we don't have the houses for them. And we have an issue certainly in Leitrim and in areas where we have poor land where we can't get planning permission to build new houses, and a lot of the old accommodation isn't suitable. So, you know, there's many issues that face people in rural Ireland, and primary to them is having, if you like, energy back into the community and trying to find employment for people and find a sense of purpose and a sense of future, because that's really what has been missing. And I commend the work you've done, and, you know, it's refreshing for somebody to be coming saying, you know, we shouldn't be looking at our disadvantage, we should be looking at our advantage. And that's really what I think we need to try and turn around. But I'm also conscious that for any sector of society to reach its potential, it needs to be at a certain level. We need to get a certain platform under it. And that's the problem that we have in many areas, is that we're without that platform. we're below the waterline, if you like, and to try and get up, to try and get on our feet again, we need assistance. We need rural communities to lift themselves up. They need a bit of encouragement and a bit of help, and they actually need investment. And investment is the key thing that we need to see happen in many of those areas. The ideals which has been put forward by Éamon O'Reilly, and I want to thank you for your contribution, and I'm very conscious of the work that Leader has done in many areas, and I know Martina very well here from the old original Leader programme covered Leitrim as well before the divide, which unfortunately I think was a huge backward step for many of the way in which it's set up now, and I think you have acknowledged that in your presentation, has not worked for communities. And I think there needs to be an acknowledgement of that, and we've often had it out at the Minister, and in fairness he acknowledges that changes need to happen, and he made some changes, but as you've said, I don't think those changes have gone far enough. The question I really want to get to is the whole notion of social enterprise and of communities coming up with ideas to move things forward. It's many years ago I was at an event, and there was a government minister there, and there was people talking about a sort of, cooperative employment and communities coming together to do things, and he made a quib. He said co-op is no op. Basically, if the private sector doesn't do it, it doesn't work. And that I think is still a concept that exists in large sectors of our establishment, of government, and of the whole way things come down. That if an individual isn't prepared to go out and take the risk, well, it won't really work for communities. And I think we need to change that. And I acknowledge that much of what the Leader programmes have been doing have been trying to turn that around. And certainly what Seán has been saying is really what we need to do. Is we need to recognise that this not only has potential, but can actually deliver real jobs for real people, and that they are sustainable and that they're long term. But we need to change the mindset, and I'd be interested to. I know you've put forward some suggestions as to what needs to happen, but what are the core things? If you could pick 3 core changes that if you could get tomorrow, what are they that would turn this around? Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks very much. I'm going to take maybe 3 people together, so I'm going to call on Senator Coffey now.
And I too want to welcome the delegation to our committee this morning. I think it gives us an opportunity, all of us, to review, I suppose, current mechanisms in terms of delivering for our rural communities. And I especially want to welcome Dr. Seán, who I know well, with nearly 30 years at this stage, from a neighbouring parish of my own. And there is no doubt, as we have heard from Seán this morning, we've heard about the resilience of the community he comes from. We've heard the passion and the commitment within that community. But not just that, we've heard about the initiative, the volunteerism amongst Seán and like-minded people in that area that have turned a small rural community that was declining in numbers into a vibrant community that not only they themselves are proud of, but indeed we in Waterford are proud of as well, and they're held up as an example of community and social enterprise across so many fronts. And I would urge, and I would have to say this, I was at the launch of Seán's book, The Enterprising Community, and it uses examples right around the country of communities helping themselves. It identifies the challenges that they originally faced. It looks at and analyses how they went about reinventing and reinvigorating their communities, and I think it's a roadmap for any community to regenerate itself. And I want to say that, Seán, you acknowledged that from the very outset the Leader Group assisted the Dunhill and associated communities in actually starting on that road. And I too want to acknowledge the fabulous work that has been done, as we've heard, from over 25 years in communities right around this country. But a number of challenges have been identified, and I think this is where we as a committee can be beneficial to the work of people that have presented this morning. Challenges that we need to identify to help communities unlock their full potential, to identify ways that communities can help themselves. And I believe that there is a great resilience in rural Ireland, and we often hear about the negative stories in rural Ireland. But if you look at the people that reside there, they are resilient, they are innovative, and they are committed. And I think we need to find ways in officialdom and as policy makers to assist those people and those communities to achieve their best potential by exploiting whatever assets that are available to them. And I've mentioned the first, that's the human asset, that's people. The second one is the natural asset that surrounds them, whether it's walkways, greenways, mountains, rural areas, whatever it is, that we identify ways to exploit that natural asset. And I think this is where the strength of the local leader groups come in, because I know the work you do on the ground. I know you're aware of the enablers and the natural assets within your communities, but I think we need to, you identified problems where changes are required in terms of whether it's funding, whether it's flexibility, or whether it's identifying ways that communities can actually exploit that full potential. So my questions are, and Seán, to you I ask, you mentioned that there's a lack of support for the CCJ, the voluntary network. If you could elaborate in terms of what you actually mean by that. Is it in terms of administration? Is it in terms of financial support? Or is it in terms of recognition by those in authority? And I include local authorities, national authorities, regional authorities. What do you mean by lack of support? Because it seems to me that you have obviously worked on a successful model that you want to roll out around the country, and you are calling for further support to try and enable that. If you could inform the committee what types of support you are talking about, to see if we can further analyse that, I think that would be a worthwhile exercise. To the leader groups, I want to ask the question, and I know you've identified, areas that we need to improve, and how we can improve, I suppose, access to the various EU programmes, increased funding, and all of that, and we recognise that. But can I ask, the question: why are some rural communities, in your view, are far more successful than others? It's probably a simple question, but it goes to the root cause of success in various rural communities. Why are some so successful, and why then are some seriously struggling? And what can we do as policymakers to assist you as a local development network to assist those communities? What changes are required in terms of policy, and what do we need to do to assist those communities?
Thanks, Senator. Deputy Michael Collins.
Yes, indeed. I'd like to thank those who have contributed here this morning, and interesting to hear what has been going on in other communities. I suppose, Dr. Seán, your story is known the length and breadth of the country. In fairness, it's been a fabulous project, and it's something that I was at a community council meeting in Goleen in West Cork in the Mizzen Head last Monday night, and we were talking about it, believe it or not, because we purchased a bit of ground next to our community centre, and we're thinking of ideas and maybe have a visit your project on there. But it's, as I said, if it's been talked about in the Mizzen Head, it's most certainly been talked about throughout the country. But it's difficult, coming from a rural community and a rural, I suppose, constituency mainly in West Cork, and in the last 2 weeks, there's been the closure of 8 businesses in my constituency. Whether it's the local shop or post office or school, and closure of a school as well due to the falling population. And I know we can identify a lot of houses that are empty in our community, especially in the towns, and we've been pushing very much so for the regeneration programme to, we'll say, expand itself into areas like in West Cork, and but it's at the present time it's not working, and it's not moving our direction. So I do find that communities are pulling out all the stops, but there's an absolute gale against them, and it's a difficulty. And I think the changing of the leader programme was detrimental to West Cork, absolutely detrimental to West Cork. And I can see the evidence and the trail of destruction from that now, which we did predict, but nobody listened. And I know that you have to work from within. A lot of it has gone under the local authority. I even contacted the local authority going back about maybe 6 weeks ago about a broadband issue. I got a response yesterday. This will tell you where things have gone now, in this country. And it took 6 weeks to respond, right? But in the meantime, the response I got was totally wrong in comparison to what I got from AIR after. So it's just telling you that I think the whole thing is lost. It's gone out of touch, basically, with reality on the ground. But I will say that the local communities are fighting very hard to try and come up with projects and try and, you know, turn things around, because nobody wants to lie down. You know, I look at a town like Drumleague, and you know, a small thing like they got a grant recently in relation to painting the village, and it had gone through tough times. That village now is rejuvenated, it's bright, they're resurfacing at the council there, and you know, things like that. They're small, but they're very, very important to that community, and has made a complete change around. But if we don't have somewhat easier access to the leader funding and funds that will continue to regenerate a community, we're only going one way, unfortunately. And if you keep, you know, draining, like closure of post offices, you keep you're knocking the very life out of a town. And I've often said here, I come from a Skull myself, where the local bank was closed, and once the local bank closed, within 12 months, the biggest shop in that town, second biggest shop, sorry, in that town, with the last 17 jobs closed, because the foot flow wasn't coming into the town basically, and they were going to the neighbouring town where they could get their bit of banking done. And the same is going to happen here with the post offices. So there's no future thinking here with the government. You know, needs a little bit of subsidy, needs to be given to the postmasters. Where they can't be living on the minimum wage. There should be an understanding that they'll be respected above that, and it would be a long-term gain to that local town. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Deputy. There's a number of questions there, and a number for Dr. Cook and for yourselves, so you might take them there now, please.
Senator Coffey there asked me what could be done. You know, what help could be given, and just to say that since 2011 CCJ was set up by Dunhill and Skibbereen after following the conferences we had, like, you know, and we have a national organisation. We have a colleague of mine is in the back of the room here, Dr. Éamon from DCU, and all we want is so small. What we want is unreal, but who has kept CCJ going from an administrative base has been Dunhill Rural Enterprises Limited, which is a voluntary organisation, and it has at least invested 5,000–6,000 every year for office, for phones, for copying, for everything, and we've carried that cost all the time. And the second thing we need, or the first thing we need, is that our model would be interrogated. And if at all possible, that it would be piloted. It would get the second pilot. Because when we went to Galway, we worked with 3 parishes, or 3 communities. We identified 116 jobs, 1 business coming back from Boston, 1 coming back from Dublin, 1 coming back from London. And because Joe McDonough died, unfortunately, he was the chairman of the subcommittee in Croke Park, and the thing went kind of off the rails on us. And even though Enterprise Ireland had backed it with 13,000, GMIT had put 6.65 in it, and the GA had put 6.5 into it, 6,500 into it, but the whole thing fell apart. And we were down the southeast, and we weren't able to. It was because of our distance away from that we weren't able to do anything about it. But if we could only get a second pilot of that, and if we got something, if there was some help in relation to administration, let it prove itself. We think it'll transform society and the economy. And you can say whatever, people can say, look at us and think, well, what are they on about? But I can tell you, our model, and it didn't belong to me, it's belonged to the people. We don't want anything. We don't want anything from it. We don't want anything. But if it's implemented, it'll transform local communities, and that, of course, without leader, of course, without the council, of course, without everyone else, it won't do nothing either, like, you know what I mean? But if you want me just to say, there are 2 small things there that I think would make a huge difference, like, you know what I mean? Just a quick point on the schools as to why they changed around. 4 individuals in Dunhill guaranteed 400,000 of a loan, 100,000 each out of their own pockets. They went down to the credit union. They bought a field. They built 40 homes for young families, and they saved the schools. And they put a new dynamic into the parish with business people. The J Club got a huge lift, and the schools got a huge lift. But it was one of the absolutely top class things that ever happened. But there was things like that. When the J Club set up, that's why I have such an admiration for, when the J Club set up their new thing in 1989, they set up a draw that raised £1.5 million. £1.5 million voluntary now. They called it the local GA crops. They got 5 clubs together. The 5 of them shared the costs, and each one maximised the profits. They were able to maximise, but they were able to share the costs of the whole thing in 5 ways, and we raised it. And we got 30,000 from Noel Davern out of 350,000. We raised that, and so did Rowan Moore, Kilrossentee, Dungarvan and Lismore. They were the 5 clubs. You know, there was just not, and I've been around the country, there's nothing they're not prepared to do. I don't, there's 2 clubs recently. I was speaking on Kilkenny Radio, or Kilkenny Carlow Community Radio, and Danesford, which is near Kilkenny, asked could they talk to me, and I said come down. So I thought one person was coming down. When I looked down the door, when I went down, I was waiting for him. There were 7 people outside the door. And they said, here's our plan. How much is that going to cost? It's going to cost $1 million. Was there any at all worry about whether or not they do it or not? That didn't come into their mentality at all. Of course they'll do it. Of course they'll get the money from wherever and from the community. Another community opened, another GA club opened, an all-weather pitch. Cost about 400,000. They had now spent 1.5 million. They owed 150,000. But I was talking to the treasurer, and he was saying, look, we have all this is wonderful. We only owe 150,000 now. This is the next thing we're going to do. This was the next thing we're going to do. Everyone else, I'm looking at, pick up the papers, and everyone said that rural Ireland is dead and gone. When it's the complete opposite of that. The potential in rural Ireland, with the help of Leader and the help of the council and all that, there's massive potential. And social enterprise is €1 billion sector, if it got a chance. Now, I've been around to the different parties, Sinn Féin, in Waterford, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Labour, and John Halligan, the Independents. I didn't get the rest of them, but I'm trying to chase them to see will they all agree to get the thing through. If they get the thing through, if they get the new policy through, I told a person down the hotel this morning, if they get that through, they'll unleash a massive amount of resources, a massive amount of energy that will transform this country. And don't we need it? Don't we need it? Don't we need our communities really motoring and not be worrying about Brexit and Trump and all the other things that happen in the world that nobody is happy about?
Thanks, Seán. Mr. O'Reilly.
Yeah, we'll just pass it to the team here, so Declan will come in first on a few of the points. We might have 3 or maybe 4 answers to your question, Deputy, and it'll tie in with yourself as well. Then Jim, and then Martina. Thanks, Skyler.
Thanks very much for the opportunity. Just, I suppose, trying to take note of the questions and see what we can do to answer them. I suppose take the easy one first, which is why does some, I'm being facetious here, why are some communities successful and others not? It's a complex answer, really. I think it comes down to an issue of empowerment, support of resources and confidence. And it's an induction loop there, and they all feed in. And it really comes back to the wider question which Deputy Canney asked on the 3 things. And you can have 3 things or 30 things, but if we were to just get into it a bit on its shopping list, I would think the inevitable broadband comes up. And people have been using the issue of broadband and electricity as being the metaphor de jour. I think it's even worse than that, or more serious than that. It's probably like water. It's about water, running water and wastewater treatment, because it's not just a question of what broadband you have. And broadband, as you know, anyone who's ever talked to someone selling you broadband, they're all the best system. But, you know, future-proof broadband's what we need here. So we need, in rural areas, broadband which can compete with urban areas at the right price. And I think Leader has a role to play there. The National Broadband Plan is in stream. We don't want to, I suppose, compromise that. But we have a broadband team in our programme, but it's actually quite constrained of what we can do. Very low amounts can be spent on capital. 20,000 euro is the maximum on a single project, which, as you might imagine, doesn't do an awful lot. I think we would welcome the opportunity to see could we do something, particularly in those areas which are the blue areas where the state money isn't going. And I think we have made a proposal ourselves to the Department on that basis. We would like to lend a hand there. I think we should be empowered to lend a hand. I think we would also say, for instance, there needs to be some form of social framework to let social enterprises, be they community shops or enterprise centres, I suppose help themselves. I mean, there's there's a number of streams of funding or resources out there which are used by community enterprises in an ad hoc way, and as Seán would have referenced in a different context, people will do whatever they can to seek and to get resources, to make things happen for the right reasons. But often, they're not actually helped, and the rules don't necessarily help people to actually get that resource. I think, as a state, we may face this. If the commercial sector is pulling out of rural Ireland, as it increasingly is, the only way that's going to be addressed is by the communities there and social enterprises there stepping up to the mark. And if people are pulling out commercially, there's a reason for that. They can't make enough money. So the only way we can run this is on the basis of supports, where the community undertakes to take on some burden, but the state also agrees to do it. That means an expansion of the schemes which might be out there, and it means a dedication of long-term funding to say, this is the way it's going to be in rural Ireland from now on. Now, there are real jobs in that. As Dr. Cook mentioned, there are real jobs in that. There are real opportunities for value added. There are careers in that. I mean, and it's something which I think we have been a little bit mealy-mouthed about. I think essentially, I think community empowerment is what we're talking about here. And Éamon would have mentioned a number of the issues which we have been supporting over the years, and we are looking at we have commissioned research there, for instance, on social enterprise, and there's a conference taking place today down the road a bit on social enterprise in local development companies, and it is becoming, a fashionable concept, but it really needs some vigorous, support at a tactical level, saying what do we need here, and we will work with you on that. We have a lot of ideas on it. We're not looking for you to buy them wholesale, but we certainly would like the opportunity to set a conversation with you on that basis. And I mean, as I said, I think there's a lot of synergy in what Seán is mentioning there. I think one of the big issues I would say is, from the point of view of the LEADER programme, we have been very constrained. Broadband is just an example of it. And there's a technical reason for broadband, which I can understand, the National Broadband Plan there. But generally, we feel that we are not being given a chance to do all we can do. And we want to do that. We believe that we have 26, 27 years, some of us, of work in the rural development, local development sector. We know we have institutionalised, I suppose, not institutionalised is the wrong phrase, but we have internalised a lot of the knowledge which is out there. We do see ourselves as being facilitators of the community. We don't see ourselves as having to do it for them. We see ourselves as making it possible for them to do it. But we feel that we aren't really being allowed to spread our wings and do it. We feel that the current structures. I'm lucky enough to work for a company which is an independent local action group, one of the few in the country. There's only 4 of us in the country, and I can feel the pain of my colleagues when we talk to them about projects. I've had a meeting yesterday with 3 other companies where we had a very simple project based on community shops, and we hope to appoint someone to do some work for us. And I thought it would take a month. It took us 6 months, because the other groups had to go through their LCDCs, and there was 2 in one county, and it had to be signed off, and I went around the track. Now, I'd be asking, what's the point in that? And I would say, I can say this because I'm in a position that I can't say it, maybe my colleagues can't. As an independent lag, I'm really happy that we are an independent lag. It doesn't get us out of all the problems, but it does mean one thing: we're responsible for our own fate. We're the captains of our own ship, masters of our own soul, you might say. We're going to get poetic about it. But and I think that's the way it used to be. And I put it this way: what was so wrong with it? And what is so right where we are now? So we would really like the opportunity to be able to help rural Ireland. We have loads of ideas. Ideas ain't the problem. And I would say, I will give the Minister credit for recognising the flaws, as Éamon says, that were in the system there. But structurally, it's still not right. We will get to the end of this programme. Don't worry, the money will all be spent, and spent properly. But if you're talking about burying the talents in the ground, well, LEADER is one of those talents which is buried in the ground. If we're getting a little bit biblical about it, we want to make the most of what we can. We want to actually do much more than we currently are doing. And we feel that we are not really being facilitated to do that. So I'm going to hand it over now to my colleague, Jim.
Okay, Chair, thanks very much for the opportunity. I would like to address the question from Deputy Canney and also from Senator Coffey. What can be done to I suppose, get rural Ireland up and running. Now, in the current LEADER programme, the biggest mistake that was made, and Declan has alluded to some, but from a voluntary board member, of which I am in Tipperary, a retired farmer at this particular juncture, fortunately, I would say that the biggest mistake that was made for rural communities in particular, and that is that we are not allowed under the current programme to animate and build capacities in communities. You wonder why one community is better than another community. I would say to you members that rural development is a 20 to a 25-year cycle before you have animated and built the capacity in rural Ireland, in any rural community. Some communities got in the 90s and they are up and running and they are the successful ones. Other communities, like anybody else in any profession or any walk of life, one farmer is better than another farmer. Why? They got the assistance faster, quicker, maybe better educated. It can be anything. The same happens to a community. If you can animate a community, but remember, it cannot be done overnight. It can only be done over a period of 20 to 25 years. So if you, as a committee, and as members of Dáil and Shannon, if you want to do one thing where there's a new programme coming down the line, if we can animate in the next programme, we will be helping to build the communities and to have the structures that Dr. Cook spoke about. So that's one thing I would say to one of those particular questions from Deputy Canney. And the Senator here. The other thing I would just like to say, while I have the opportunity, and I'll hand over then to my colleague Martina beside me, and that is, I think we all must bear in mind that in the past, and we're looking for changes in the new programme, but in the past, we were in the real bottom-up approach. It was farmers and postmen and school teachers who became activists in their own community, who became board members, who took on a task. The task was to empower their own communities. I think a bit of that is lost. And unfortunately, from the point of view that we don't see too many young people joining the boards of local development companies, I think we need to do something about that, and all our companies are doing the best we can. And, and while we all realise that we have to be accountable, the increased bureaucracy, I would say to you and challenge you by saying that, there is increased bureaucracy, but there's less local decision making. Just bear that in mind. The decisions in the past were all made locally. Today, there are less decisions made down at parish level than has been in the past. And I will just cite one very, very successful organisation that has already been mentioned in this room, and that is the credit union movement. Look at the credit union movement, look at that model. Local development companies in the past had that model, and they delivered. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for the opportunity of speaking. Just coming in on aspects that weren't covered by my colleagues, the three core areas that we would see as needing change is the stop-start of the rural development. We waited a long time between 2013 and 2016, the last time when the programme got up and running. That's with Brexit now looming in terms of the impact of rural Ireland, that shouldn't be acceptable. We're calling on a continuation of the LEADER programme, maybe having a national rural development programme that we had previously around 2001 to 2006, and then a call for local development strategies in 2019, so that it will be absolutely critical that that does not happen, that stops and start that happened in the past. The next programme is very much about smart villages, and when you talk, it's the Bled Declaration, and it's been agreed by Europe. And when you look at it, it is essentially really underpinning the way local development companies and LEADER was bottom up, local people mobilising to use their assets to work together, and putting in support from new technologies as being a possible solution, but not just one solution. So we're asking that to be supported. We really are urging that local funding is put in place, that they're not national schemes, because when you ask about communities being left behind, they'll be left behind by national calls when they have to put in an application and they mightn't hear back. And it's the best dressed gets the funding, the most dynamic. So we really feel that local development companies, working with all partners, local authorities, elected representatives, communities, are best placed to develop all community and rural development with the focus on communities. Our boards are community, with their state sector, their social pillars. We have the structures in place. Martin mentioned about Original Leader being so successful, set up in 1991. 3 local authorities came together when the coal mines closed, and there was all local actors came together with their own funding, their own decision makers, supported by state and local authority and elected representatives, and the fruit of those community projects are now on. In terms of disadvantaged communities, I would say that they were, as Jim has said, the earliest to LEADER, but we can never be complacent. Communities always have new issues, be it new communities, be it a change overnight. So local development companies put in the hard work, working at a ground level, and we never say no to a community. No matter how hard it is to get development there, we believe it's hard work, strategic development, long-term plans, but based on consultation with the community, because it has to be sustainable. The community have to want it for good return on public investment. So the other point I'd like to make is farmers. This current LEADER programme doesn't sufficiently address farm diversification. There's no specific measure. Also, in terms of enterprise support under the LEADER programme, innovation is key. Basically, you have to prove in your enterprise that it doesn't exist previously. We would be recommending that the Back to Work enterprise allowance model, which is so successful in terms of setting up businesses, would be used in the farming sector, working with farmers on a collective basis and freeing up that stringent measures that LEADER have in terms of innovation. There's no support programme specifically geared to the farming sector. So that's another input.
Thanks very much. I'm just going to move back to the members now, and Senator Grace O'Sullivan, and then it'll be followed by Maura Hopkins and Michael Fitzmaurice.
Thank you, Chairman. And it's wonderful to hear your enthusiasm, because I know you are like the champions in your communities, but particularly I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Seán Cook, who I know in person, and I attended the Communities Creating Jobs workshop you had out in Dunhill. Like, what you're doing in that community is incredible in terms of ground up and giving example. But I think what, for me, as someone who's living close to the Dunhill, Fenner, Boatstrand and Anstown area, the creative, holistic approach you've taken to developing your community that has been a success. So it's this opening your mind and opening potential, and as you say, Martina, that ability to innovate. I suppose we're here today in committee, Chair, and we have no national policy on social enterprise. There's no national policy. So I'd like to just recommend here, having listened to the contributors, that we approach Minister Ring and ask him, when will we have a policy? Because, I mean, you've identified the need. We've also recognised the importance of sustaining rural communities. And the Green Party put in a submission to the National Social Enterprise Strategy in December 2017. And one of the areas that we were looking at was, and it feeds in, Jim, with what you were saying in terms of the farmers as well, was this whole transit to decarbonising our environment. So that in rural Ireland, we think in the Green Party that there's huge opportunity to mobilise and engage community working towards the whole renewable sector, energy efficiency, reducing greenhouse gases. So it's just something I'd like to ask you, have you any plans in that area in your communities? Because, for instance, there's potential for farmers with regard to solar generation of energy. There's potential for, in general, in the whole renewable sector, in enterprising communities to develop the whole markets, energy market, where we move away from the burning of fossil fuels. But the whole point for the Green Party is that we get bottom-up movement in this area, and that we get cooperatives moving, community moving, so that we're working towards a healthier and better environment for all. So I understand, you know, it will take a lot of innovation, but that micro-generation of energy is a huge potential for rural communities. I know, sending out around your area, I mean, there is some engagement with regard to wind and the potential there, and there's a lot of kind of opposition and synergy, but it's because the model that's currently being used is a top-down model. So it's large, where we have large corporate businesses coming in, and we're lacking that community engagement. So my question is, do you see potential in that area, in your communities, where we could really put a request to the government that when you're looking for your funding, that is a huge potential that the government could support you on? What else have I here? Leader, just in terms of what I hear from people in my own area in Waterford, is access to funding is difficult for projects, that whereby the individual has to come with their own guarantee to match the match funding mechanism. So I just wonder, would you see any opportunities where that match funding could be minimised, or what could be done in order to bring more people in to have the opportunity to develop their enterprising ideas, so that there aren't barriers at an initial stage. But by and large, you know, we need to come in behind what you're doing, particularly Seán, that model you talk about. Absolutely, like the Green Party would be 100% behind you if we can get that pilot going You're ticking all the boxes. I mean, your presentation is so enthusiastic, but it's not just what you're saying to us here. We know it in the community, because I know Senator Coffey and Deputy Butler, we see what you're doing. And that model would be brilliant if we could roll it out. So whatever support we can give you, we're there to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator. And just to point out, this is the first meeting in relation to this general area, and we were going to put together a report as a committee and recommendations to government. So I think it's very apt that we would have Dr. Cook here and the leader companies. The next speaker is Senator Maura Hopkins.
Thank you, Chair. And again, like other representatives, I would very much like to thank you for your presentations today. I actually know Seán because we shared the pulpit at the Speaker's Corner in Balladreen, and we were talking on this same subject of rural communities. And I would very much like to welcome and thank the presentations and the questions that have been answered in respect of leader. I just make a few points, and I'm going to start by, I suppose, some of the answers that have been given. I think one of our big challenges, we know that certain rural areas are doing well and others are more challenging. And I'm very interested in your response, Declan, with regard to why is that? And I suppose you've spoken about support, resources, confidence, and obviously the big game changer in terms of better broadband. And then I suppose we have Jim's contribution with regard to that longer term planning, and things don't happen overnight. So it's trying to bring all of those issues together and challenges together to try and support particularly more weaker communities, and Martina will know that because I work very closely with Martina and the other staff in Roscommon Leader Partnership, who are doing tremendous work, and they have I suppose a particular focus on areas of disadvantage and on communities that need that extra bit of support, maybe to get themselves more organised with regard to making applications, the need for kind of that longer term planning or where we see ourselves going. And I suppose just in the context of what you've said, Chair, as well, with regard to putting a report together, I think that is one of our key challenges, to try and support those rural communities who need that extra little bit of help, because the communities that are, as we've said there in terms of those 3 points, that are well supported, that are resourced in terms of, communities that are organised, will succeed. Our challenge is in the other areas, and I think the one word you used, Declan, is complex. It's a complex issue, but that shouldn't mean that we don't rise to that complex challenge, and that we need to do. I just want to, I suppose, point to some of just 1 or 2 examples from our own area. I know that Roscommon Leader Partnership, and we've spoken about this in terms of the integrated approach, working with, say, County Council, Roscommon County Council, working with our ITs, and obviously rooted in the community. I mean, a very good example is the food hub in Castlereagh, which has been established recently. And that really responds to market demands as well, in terms of, the need for an increased number of staff within that sector. Particularly, we know that we need an increased number of chefs, and there is huge possibility in that area of food and training, obviously, alongside that. So I think, I suppose I use that example because it's responding to market demands, because the key issue in terms of sustaining any rural community is a job and people being employed. So I think we need to see more of that. The other example I will use is say Kilbride Community Centre, and it kind of, I'm reminded when you speak, Jim, in terms of 21 years ago, you know, they had a long-term vision, and they have never stood still in terms of wanting to achieve, wanting to build on success, and Roscommon Leader Partnership have very much been involved with them. But they have set up a community shop, and you know, that's a very good social enterprise that's responding to the needs within communities. So I have a lot more examples, but I just want to use those two as a mechanism of really emphasising the strong need for our minister, for the department, for all of the agencies around that, including our employment agencies, that we would respond better to more to weaker areas. And I think that is crucial, because we have wonderful examples. I'm sitting beside two Waterford representatives, and I know Mary was in the room as well, but I mean that wonderful example of you know, Dungarvan being completely transformed by the green. Exactly. So you know, that is, I suppose we need to try and find the resources in those weaker areas and rise to that complex challenge, and try and support the people within those communities as much as possible. So that's kind of, I don't really have a question because a lot of the questions have been asked, but it's just a point I think that needs emphasis.
Thanks, Senator. Deputy Fitzmaurice. I'll call on you after Deputy.
Thanks, Chairman. First of all, welcome. Thanks for your presentations. I want to mention Martina. She's down in her own neck of the woods. Look, at the first thing, rural Ireland, there's a lot of debate about it. I think a message needs to go out clear that it's probably the best place you can live, to be quite frank about it. And the problem is that we need to make sure that we keep people in it, because that's how you'll keep it vibrant. And by its nature, in nearly all parts of rural Ireland, you know, one time ago there was you either set up something yourself or you had to go somewhere working. And there's a massive amount of people that set up their own little business and was their own entrepreneurs in rural parts of Ireland. And my questions to you would be, at the moment there is problems. Say, I come from basically a rural setting, agricultural background. There'd be a guy down the road that'd do welding, a person up the road that'd do fitting, someone else that'd do something else. Unfortunately, at the moment, through the planning process, there is a problem getting planning for people that want to do something in their own area. They want to move you into where sort of everyone is doing it. And look, there may be merits in some of that, but it may be blocking some of it. What would your thoughts be? I would be a believer that in most of rural Ireland, agriculture is the backbone, to put it simply. And in a lot of parts, especially with the cap, and the new cap is coming in 2020, there was a lot of parents that said, look, we're only getting a few thousand, we can't make a living out of that, and there was a flight for youngsters off the land. And I believe to keep people there, that you have to encourage youngsters, girls and lads, that they get a fair crack at the whip, because I've noticed in certain parts of the country where you have larger scale operators coming in renting land and the flight of the land, you won't have as vibrant of a community. And I'm wondering, what's your thoughts on the family farm? What's your thoughts on, I've studied, and you mentioned broadband there, in parts of England, and okay, the broadband is sort of to and fro, and hopefully everything will work out. But what's your thoughts? I actually went to England. I looked at areas where they have community involvement in delivering broadband, where I think that the likes of AIR has to be sat down and basically put into their box and say, if these people are prepared to bring this connection right along this road, are ye prepared to give them into the box, and the funding given to that community that's willing to do that. Now, no one is making them do it, but that if a community is willing to do that and do it safely and have everything right, I think that it may be a way of speeding up the process of broadband, where you talked about, Declan, on the areas that are sort of down on broadband at the moment. A problem I notice at the moment, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, with more people going to work, and that's good, that's appreciated. We now find that in the local towns, in the tidy towns, or in the CE schemes and in the 2 schemes, that you have a criteria to fit, and if you don't fit that, well, goodbye, you have to take a year off and actually draw social welfare for a year at home, rather than staying at the job you were at. And it has put pressure on rural communities that were trying to make their towns or villages better. Would you agree that we need the likes of the Department of Ag, Roads, Social Protection and Finance? Because being realistic, in a lot of parts of rural Ireland, the banks have gone. There's no point in we crying about them. But we have the credit unions and we have the post offices, wherever some of them will be, but we have the credit unions that has a lot of money, that are willing to spend money, that are, and it's our own money actually, that need a bit of flexibility to be able to move into the markets of giving out, of basically resourcing rural Ireland and funding. Included in that would be the likes of the GA and the different town teams in that. But this joint up thinking, what would be your ideas on that? The voluntary groups, in my opinion, we should never underestimate the amount of work that people do night in, night out, voluntary. And there may be towns or villages doing better than others, but in fairness, everyone is trying. I've yet to see a village or a town that there isn't somebody trying to pioneer it. But they're up again a headwind, for the simple reason to have to try and be always on the ball. And I noticed it earlier on where Éamon talked that there should be nearly a one-stop shop, that they know what's coming out in January and what's coming in February and what's coming in March and the different months, because they're looking at papers and they're trying to find out the whole time. And these are voluntary people, we have to realise. That what's your ideas on, I know in town and village there is new ideas being thrown out there, and I saw one community that I would have worked with, that you might have 3 or 4 small villages. There'd be a shop and a pub and church or whatever, or maybe 5, and then you'd have like a main town in the middle, to sort of try and work them into an economic area that would feed each other. What's your ideas on that? And in the line of Leader, yeah, you look at Leader heads with the things that were sort of the obstacles that were there is a major problem. I know it's good to hear that you're saying that all funding will be drawn down, and that'd be great. But isn't it now that we need to start making sure that the voices are heard about the simplification? And what's your views on the likes of the municipal districts in each area having more autonomy over a budget in their area? Look at what's happening at the moment is basically you're giving money and everyone decides then in the line of the council. That's basically all that comes. But that the municipal district that would know more of what's going on in an area would have more handling of its own autonomy and working with the local communities in a bottoms up. But I think if we don't have it, we can work bottoms up, but if the foundations aren't there, that the different departments aren't working together, and agriculture, the cap is a big one coming down the line. If the family farms, because we see it in the west of Ireland especially, where you see the family farms, the youngsters moving away from it. And the more of that will happen, if we're the greatest magicians in the world, if we don't have the people there, we're not going to, it's hard to revive something. And what would your idea, or what would your thoughts be on like a tax credit for areas that are to encourage people to come to areas that are getting a harder hit than others?
Thanks, Deputy. I just call now, just to finish it off, Deputy Eugene Murphy, please.
And because a lot of what I want to say has been, asked or referred to by both Michael and Maura, I'm not going to prolong this. I want to welcome you all here. It's great to meet you. I know of your drive and enthusiasm to make things better, but I'm sure you don't mind if I keep a special mention for our own lady from Roscommon. And I really want to pay tribute to Martina, because I think, she has a real hands-on approach. She's been involved in many innovative ideas throughout the county, and I'm sure, like Michael and Maura, we really acknowledge her enthusiasm. And I always, I'm amazed by the amount of meetings politicians have to attend at night, and gatherings and launches. But I think Martina nearly outdoes us. She's great for that. So really, I just want to pay tribute to the work you do in our region. I'm going to just really keep it down here to basics, because the biggest problem, I suppose, in a county like Roscommon at the moment, and Michael and Maura and Martin will know this from an adjoining county, is broadband. And if you look at the county of Roscommon, and I know being a bit parochial here, we need the national rollout more than any other county in the country. I mean, over 50% of the county is relying on the national rollout. And we've been disappointed on many, many occasions. And basically, I want to know, in your engagement with government, are they talking to you about broadband? Are they talking about giving you a greater role in broadband? Because, like the other politicians, I get companies coming to the whole time saying, we can deliver this, we can deliver that. But I'm not going to go around recommending a broadband company, because I don't know what they are going to deliver, and many of them pick and choose anyway. They're in business. The reality is they want to be successful and make money. And I've seen this happen already in the county. They have come in and they have picked the cherries off the tree, and they have left everything else. So we don't want that scenario, but it really is vital and important for rural Ireland. We talk about the post offices, and they are important, definitely, in parts of our regions, but they are not as important as broadband. So I'm wondering about the engagement there. I fully accept, what Martina is saying about the stop-start scenario. That is doing the whole leader project no good, and we've seen it in our own county, this happening, and people lose faith in it. So I fully accept and agree with what you're saying there. We must have an ongoing plan. We mustn't have these weeks and months and this is coming and this isn't coming. That scenario isn't good at all. I also want to, there are so many communities who have such fantastic ideas, and Michael referred to this as well. And I suppose if you look at rural Ireland down through the years, look at the innovative people we've had, who started businesses from an old backyard and a shed. Amazing. It's just amazing. It would happen nowhere in the world. And I see at the moment now a group of people in our own town of Strokestown, and despite the wind farm on Steve Bawn, which, as Michael knows, I got many slapped in the face about, but we have 1,500 people a month going onto that mountain now, looking to walk, to exercise. They have put in Quelch have put in a huge amount of tourism type attractions, and they could do a lot more, but they have done an X amount. But the point I want to get to is this: there are 7 people in a radius of 10 miles who have business proposals, tourism business proposals to link up. For example, one is a wood museum in Strokestown, which would be unique, and would have, it would get people from all over the country and abroad into the town. We already have the National Family Museum. There are 65,000 people coming into it. So if we had something like that, it would be great. But in relation to trying and developing a wood museum, I'm coming up against a brick wall. It looks like that nobody at a government level is able to help us. And we don't have such a facility anywhere in Ireland as a wood museum. And because you have Quelch out there, 700 acres, and we have a wind farm on it, but we now have, we have tourism-related things on it and health arenas on it and all that. And this would link so much in to that area, and it would be, it would be a fantastic economic boost for that region. But to develop that scenario, it's just impossible. And what I'm saying here is I would love people like Leader to be given more power by government to involve themselves in that type of development. And again, I want to know from maybe discussions you have with the Minister of the Government, Are they looking at widening your powers or giving you more powers to take on board projects like this? And finally, we had briefings yesterday with the IFA, and the one point was made very strongly, and Martin and Michael and Maura will know this, and Paudie was probably there as well. They're talking about renewable energy. They're open to dealing with renewable energy. There's a huge area there, Chair, as you would know, that could be developed. Again, is that something the government are discussing with you, or maybe saying to you, like, let's have a look at this, let's see can we develop this further, because they are the areas, in my belief, that we have to develop. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy. I just had Deputy Canney just wants to come in briefly.
Just a very brief comment, because it's something that sort of runs across all of it, and I just wonder your comments in regard to many people who are on social welfare and who want to get onto various schemes and who want to start their own businesses. I find that they're in an absolute trap, that they can't get any help or assistance. It's almost like that they fall into this abyss and they have to be a year on social welfare before they can get on a back to work scheme. They have to be a year on social welfare before they can get on this and get on that and get on the other, and they just despair at trying to get out of that trap. And I just wonder, because I know in my own area there are many of the schemes out there who do great work, who have loads of people in their late 50s, early 60s, who aren't going to get a job in the economy, and yet they're sent to Job Path to write CVs for jobs that don't exist. And I just wonder your view in regard to that, because I think it's creating a logjam, and it's something that needs to be resolved. And I know it's Department of Social and Community Protection, but it's something that affects everyone. And just another point in regard to that, and it's also about rural areas and the difficulty rural people have. And yesterday we had people in another committee here about school bus transport. And if you have a family living in a rural area and they have work, and there's one person in the house working, they can't get a medical card, and then they can't get a school bus, and then they can't send their children to school, and they end up in this thing that they sit to the back to themselves, well, you know, I was better off with no job. And that's the reality for many people in rural Ireland. And I think, you know, somewhere somebody needs to realise the impact that this withdrawal of services is going to have eventually, because it's all having a knock-on effect in the negative direction. I'd just like your views on that, but particularly the one about people who find themselves in the unemployment situation, and, you know, how they can get out of it to get assistance to get back on their feet and get back to work, rather than being sent down some route where there's no work.
Thanks, Deputy. Senator Coffey, one line.
Very briefly, Chairman, just while our witnesses are here, because I'm conscious there's a Seán vote due and I may have to leave, and I just want to get it in while I'm here. You mentioned it yourself, Chairman, earlier, that our committee would look at following up on a lot of the evidence that we've heard today. And I would just like to make a formal proposal to the committee, and I want to ask my witnesses, or the witnesses that are in committee today, if they would assist us with it. But my formal proposal is that we as a joint Oireachtas committee would compile a formal report on supporting community and social enterprise in rural areas nationally. And I would ask that we would have a deep engagement, not only with our witnesses today, but other collaborators and stakeholders that can assist us with that. But I'm proposing that now to you, Chairman. I would ask members to support us on that, and maybe we can agree on a rapporteur. But the reason I'm raising it now to ask if our witnesses here would collaborate with us, help us with us, and inform us on doing that report. I think it's timely now to prepare for future rural development programmes.
Thanks very much, Senator, and we certainly will take that on board and discuss it further in maybe a private session. But Mr. O'Reilly, you might take up on some of the points. A lot of points made. Maybe some ground was covered already. But you know, not everyone has to speak either on your side. But you might just take out some of the points and try and address them. Equally so, Dr. Cook.
I'll ask Martina to come in first on some of the specific points there on farm diversification. That Declan will come in, and I'll try to wrap up then, because I think there was a lot of questions there in fairness. Thanks. Go ahead.
So one of the most important things is that we have outreach offices in all our areas, so the farming community feel comfortable coming into us in their wellies, whatever. So that local engagement is key. I was challenged by my board because our TOOS numbers was decreasing, and also we were delighted with the increase in number of rural social scheme places. We now have going on 174 in our county, and we had engagement then with the Department of Social Protection locally, and we identified together a need to increase the awareness of the farming community in terms of accessing Farm Assist. Our team came up with an app that actually tested the means and engaged with the farming community. So ourselves, the Department of Social Protection, the IFA are now going to the marts in County Roscommon, holding workshops, getting them into Farm Assist, having direct engagement. Farm Assist also now tracks a budget, a training budget that we're accessing, and that's very important. The Rural Social Scheme is key to our county and key to our farming community. Also, I suppose our company is delighted to be given the challenge of having a national contract for digital skills, and we particularly focus on the farming community, working with the Department of Agriculture, because talking to the IFA, the future of farming is in precision farming, digital knowledge. So we have to support our farming community with digitalisation. And again, we're totally there on the ground to support that. We have supported over 5,000 farmers last year, working with the IFA and Teagasc all around on supporting their digital uptake. Again, it's a complex issue. Farming communities are embedded in the communities. They want a community that will sustain their children and family and the next generation, so that they're there to mind them. It's a life cycle approach. So we need to be holistic. That's why Leader works. It's integrated. It's about having the job, the social enterprise locally. So, and again, we're calling specifically for an action such as the Back to Work Enterprise Allowance, or a special scheme to support the farming community and their farm diversification projects. There's a lack of trust in the farming community. We have to engage with them, build it up. Their bureaucracy, lots of forms, they're sceptical. Local development companies are ideally placed to continue our work on Leader and the RSS right throughout CAP and the next programme with the farming community. We have their trust. They're our colleagues. They're the people we work with on a daily basis. Just coming in terms of Martin's point about how we deal with people who are unemployed, I think, and getting them in support. I think the Social Inclusion Community Programme, activation programme that we work is very good. It's very personalised. We sit down with people individually, find out where they are. It's confidential. There's sometimes a lot of holistic other issues. We work with them on an individual basis to break their issues, personal development, also then getting them into training, education, and it's on a case-by-case basis, local basis. And we would be really recommending to government that the TWOS programme would be extended to the same as the Community Employment Scheme. 1 year is just not enough. The feedback from TWOS participants, it's wonderful to get as a bridge to get into employment. So if that was extended, it would be of great benefit. So there were my points.
Okay. Yeah, Chair, I'll try to go quickly through some questions, answers there. Senator Hopkins mentioned a number of issues about the challenges there. I think one of the things we could say, and Martina's made reference to it in covering a number of issues there, is we see ourselves as being one-stop shops for communities and small businesses. And we'd like to see that probably recognised in any new framework. We see ourselves as, particularly from the point of view of innovation, as something which we understand in the context. It doesn't always have to be, Einstein stuff. It can be just very simple transfer of ideas from one area to another, or from one context to another. And so the innovation broker idea is something which we are certainly saying we see that as being out there, back to what Jim was saying about animation being an important part of the role. Out there meeting people, kicking the tires, meeting people in farmyards, meeting people in community centres at night, all of that stuff. We do it already, but we'd rather have sufficient resources that is do it to the level we think is needed. From the point of view of energy, the Senator has left now, but I think one issue on that is energy is becoming something, and the whole smart village idea is very much about areas which make the most of what they have. have and opportunities they have, as well as integration and all of those good things. I think if we are to have local energy as a factor in rural development and in local development, grid access is going to have to be improved and localised, and solutions to local source of energy be produced, and letting communities keep the money they make from those sources of energy. So there's a little bit of work there which has to take place, and Europe as ever is probably ahead of us in some of the examples, but maybe the smart village concept will lead to those being I suppose cascaded down. Broadband was mentioned there by a couple of the deputies and senators, and broadband, just to make mention of that, we have John Droge, who is the director of the Broadband's office, coming across to Ireland next week to meet with us. On that, he's the head of the broadband at local level. We have a lot of ideas. Deputy Fitzmaurice mentioned ideas there, some of those which we have actually put to our department on that. Now, there are issues, as we're told repeatedly, on state aids and the National Broadband Plan, but we're very willing to try and have a go and put our shoulder to the wheel, and we think we have a coherent and totally rational way of dealing with that. I think that covers most of the questions we have here. Did I leave anything out there, really? Probably left a lot out.
No, I think you're fine. Will you come in on the social welfare?
I think Martina's maybe covered it, but I'd share and echo Deputy Canney's concern that there are many people who may fall into a chasm between unemployment and a more sustainable living income, and that's something that we would share, that in the movement between scheme and something else, that there should be a midway that incentivises people to progress along that. So that would form part of our discussions with the department, and I think your predecessor committee in their report, Building Viable Rural Communities, had some ideas in that regard that we would certainly share. The other aspect of it, I think you mentioned or hinted at, was that those who may be at 55 plus, who are not maybe physically up to the challenge of getting back on a building site, or they won't do it again, but have an awful lot to offer. So there probably is a third way somewhere between employment and self-employment, and some of the activation measures in their current iteration may not be the most suitable way, but those people are very anxious to give back to their own communities and to contribute in their own ways. So in terms of a national employment service, although it's the remit of another department, we would see it as being community-based and not-for-profit, and that it would link very strongly to the SICAP programme, meaning that there would need to be a level of cross-departmental cooperation which allows for a community aspect to alternatives to welfare.
Mr. O'Reilly.
Thanks, Claire. If I could just try and maybe wrap up, just as well as bottom up, and we're obviously partnership companies as well, so a lot of what we do is work with a lot of the agencies, and we can bring that expertise, be it Teagasc or the enterprise boards, to it, be it with small farmers, and our own board in NEWKD has joined Teagasc, and the ETBs have talked about digital access for farmers. Again, very similar to what Martina has been rolling out as well, but a localised version of that. So it's a partnership approach is very important as well. Deputy, you asked as well about municipal districts and the autonomy of decision making. I suppose it wouldn't be for us to say how local authorities should operate, but certainly in terms of local, the more local the decision is, the more empowered the community is, and I think that goes back to Jim's point as well. You asked about a tax credit maybe for hard-hit areas. I think it's something that should be explored, or maybe the VAT was reduced for the tourism sector, and I think that's maybe something that should be explored, because certainly the Western Seaboard and rural areas, maybe it's something that could be explored around VAT or tax credits. I think we don't have a fix on that, but it's certainly a positive thing. In relation to biodiversity, Jim here has said that in Germany some farmers get up to 40% of their income from solar energy. So it's certainly, again, that goes back to keeping young people with newer technology and newer ways of gaining income, I think, on the land as well. Yes, in relation to the Minister and the Department asking us about taking on other projects, certainly they are keen, other programmes, they are keen that we do it, and we are very keen that we do it. We cover the whole country, so we are very positive, and we have a very good relationship with the Minister and the Department in relation to exploring those ideas. But around the next programme, there's 9 areas of CAP, and we wouldn't want to be pigeonholed into any one of those, because, like the environment, or sustainability farming and all that, we feel we have a role in that, you know. In terms of matched funding as well, it was asked earlier, I suppose on the community side, we have rules, and if private sector it is 50%, but so we have rules, and there certainly has to be a sense of viability and fair play in relation to private sector. In relation to community funding, you have other funds like the Cloncritas or Community Finance Ireland that do loans and are very much on the ground, Community Finance Ireland. And also the credit unions are a way locally. Some of our bodies would explore, if we've gone through a business plan with an individual, they will take that you've gone through it, they know the professionalism of our staff, the experience of our staff, and they will take that as a process potentially for easing the process. And certainly credit unions are now giving out unsecured loans to farmers for up to 50,000. So that's something that, again, the credit unions operate on a local basis as well. So I think that's something we can. And in relation then to any of the matters discussed here today, we're happy to progress with them and feed back into them as well. You know, for the future, we're delighted to be able to have such a robust discussion and interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. O'Reilly. Just to wrap up, Seán, you might say.
Thank you. I just would like to ask everyone a question. I'm after coming up here to say, and everything I've heard on this side, everything I've heard from everyone over there, and I'm not being nice to you lads, I agree with everything. I actually agree with everything. I think there's lots of good ideas from everyone. Lots of good ideas. Now, I'm going to leave here and I'm going home. And the first place I'll go into, there's going to be a row. Maybe not a row, I won't have a row, like you know. But I was asked one time the question, which letter in the word no don't you understand? Is it the N or the O? Have you got a problem? You know what I mean? Going in on a very reasonable request, like, you know what I mean? So how is it that we have leader with all these brilliant ideas, and I know they're doing brilliant work. I really do know they're doing brilliant work. And I know that you're doing brilliant work, and I listen to you, I read about you in the paper, and I look at you on the television, and I'm saying, gee, that's a great idea. You know, that's a good idea. You mean about the social welfare. That's a good idea, Michael, you're making about rural Ireland time and time again. And that's a good idea, Paudie, that things that you've come up with, even the suggestions you've put there to us. So what's the problem? How can we deal with the gap between us, all of us, and the system? Because I don't blame nobody in the public service for anything. It's the system that they're being forced to manage. They're being forced to implement things. And when people go down to the pub, they'll say, did you hear that? You wouldn't make that up. You couldn't make that up. Leader came out one time there a while ago with a 50% grant for communities, and they equated it to a 50% grant for private. And they were equating community of volunteers with private people looking for profit, and okay. But you couldn't make it up. Like, there's things that we spend a lot of our time thinking, you can't. We had a young chap down, and we begged the Hughes to leave him stay here for another year. It wouldn't have suited us, it wouldn't have given us more work. He had a degree, but he had been bullied in school, and you wouldn't believe the difference he was making. And 12 months was up, and they took him away from us, and they gave him nothing. And 3 years later, he's now eligible again. And they're giving him, hey, he did great work with him 3 years ago. Would ye now do another year with him, and maybe, because the man is 29 years of age, 28 years of age, a lovely fella now, a great fella, lots of potential. So we have him for 12 months, we're doing great work with him, he's coming out of his own, he's talking to us freely, he's getting involved. He wouldn't say boo when he came first. Now he's 3 years. Where was he for the 3 years? He's back on the 23rd of September. The only place they want to put him now is back to us, because they thought that when he was with us at first, he was going well. So maybe he can pick up 3 years later and make him now go well, or build on what you were doing with him. So there's a million of those type of small things, of social welfare things. I could talk to you all day and all night about the whole things, you know. But ye have all the answers. But if ye have all the answers, and we have all the, between us we have all the answers, why can't we implement these things? Why can't we give leader that role? Why is it? Why? I don't understand what he said. And anyway, listen. Yeah.
First of all, different groups come into a committee and we'll do a report here, right? And that report will be sent on. But at the end of the day,
yeah.
Right,
so,
and this is, let's nail it down to this. If the will isn't there within in either a government or a department, we will lobby. Martin Kinney is in opposition, I am. But at the end of the day, whatever is agreed in Europe under the CAP coming in, right? Whatever is agreed by officials in government and whoever supports government, and unless hard decisions are made, that it's pushed in by the people that will either support a government or be in government, then that's the only way you get it.
Yeah. The last point I'll make is, and I'll only say it again, social enterprise is a €1 billion sector. Yeah. The potential in rural Ireland is ginormous. Yeah. All these people that are running these big companies, all multinational, they're all in rural Ireland. They're all in the communities. They can be tapped into. They'll sponsor us. They'll help us. They'll give us expertise. They'll connect us with the global economy. We're being offered this all the time, and all with them. Then we have to go in and say, "No, can we do this?" And then we're told, "No, you can't do that. You can't do that. No, that's not in the criteria. No. This is not on. This is not on." So look, lads, I'm asking you, lads, can we all work together and see? Can we just get the new policy and then an implementation plan? And if we do that, I think it'll be a huge step forward for us if we can do that.
Thanks very much, Seán. I think we've had a very constructive, positive engagement on this particular topic. I'd like to thank each and every one of the witnesses for your contributions. I want to pay tribute to my own local development company in Clare, with Doreen Graham at the helm. She does a fantastic job. I work very closely with her on many projects. We're working on one currently which will deliver additional monies to Clare, actually, and looking forward to that, announcing that particular scheme in the coming weeks. Well, I think it goes back to what Mr. O'Reilly has said. It's a partnership approach, and if we can work together, the state, politicians, the agencies, community activists like yourself, Dr. Cook, who has Seán.
A clear name now.
Seán, okay.
From Scattery Island.
Yes,
that's what Seán came from, Scattery Island.
But it's all about that partnership and working together. And in County Clare, the county I represent, we're to the fore of this. We've developed a rural strategy in conjunction with all the stakeholders, including Leader. And it's about working through that programme and development plans in conjunction with communities and trying to unlock the potential that Senator Coffey has said. This year, for my summer holidays, myself and my wife, our 2 kids, we went to Waterford. Went down to Waterford, Seán.
Good.
No, we didn't get to Dunhill, but we went on the Greenway. Yeah. And very good. That's the potential that Senator Coffey mentioned. And just to open up that particular Greenway over 50 kilometres, and the social enterprise along that route as a result, it's fantastic to see it. I'm working on a similar project in Clare. It involves Leader as well, along the banks of the River Fergus, from Ennis to Clarecastle. And we'd hope that there will be spin-off activity from that as well. But it is about unlocking that and working in partnership. But this is a key priority for our committee, and I'd really like to thank you sincerely for engaging so constructively, so positively, and we will certainly take up on that offer that you've given for more engagement, and the clerk will be back in touch, and I wish you well in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Suspend for 2 minutes then.
We're just going to suspend for 2 minutes and go into private session.